Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Saraswati Devi Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Krishna, Hare Ram, Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Ram, Ram Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Ram, Ram Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Ram, Ram Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare 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 Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, 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 Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur,
Srila Prabhupada ki
Jai.
Nitai Gaur Premanande.
Hari
Hare Krishna. What a beautiful kirtan. Thank you, Jamala's team. Hare Krishna, welcome everyone to the Be a Gardener campaign. And we have a good fortune today to have His Holiness Devamrita Swami Maharaj today to enlighten us. Maharaj joined the ISKCON through Srila Prabhupada's books, and he joined in 1972. And Maharaj has been authored so many books, and he's also now preaching extensively in Australia and New Zealand. And today we are very fortunate that Maharaj is going to enlighten us about the publishing of the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Please accept our humble obeisances, Maharaj. All glory to Prabhupada. Thank you so much for joining us today. Hare Krishna, Maharaj.
Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshun Militang Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadha Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktavrinda. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Let's take a journey back in time to the early 70s. Book distribution had exploded in the USA, and devotees were tasting the extraordinary, inconceivable, incomparable delight of distributing Srila Prabhupada's books as their life and soul. And Srila Prabhupada was fanning the flames of this massive wildfire. Amidst the extraordinary discovery of huge book distribution, there was a problem that Srila Prabhupada described as something affecting all of ISKCON. Problem, he said, that was the whole movement's problem. What could that have been? A problem affecting the whole International Society for Krishna Consciousness. The problem was, as he explained, he had finished all the translation work of his rendition of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. But the volumes were not published. He considered this an ISKCON-wide problem. Now, first of all, before we talk about the achintya, inconceivable production of Chaitanya Charitamrita, first, we must deal with the inconceivable translation of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita by Srila Prabhupada in 18 months. As most of you know, Srila Prabhupada was not just translating as his full-time service. He was managing the Krishna conscious movement, which was expanding unpredictably, spontaneously, sometimes organized. Things were very volatile in those days, 71, 72, 73. big leaders coming and big leaders going, and temples opening and temples closing. But amidst all that, what you all today would consider chaos, amidst all that, bhakti was expanding amazingly. So Srila Prabhupada was translating a few hours every night while dealing with multiple issues and intricacies, just one of which these days we would scratch our heads and fall on the floor before the deities and say, I don't know if I can handle this. But Srila Prabhupada was coping with massive, intricate, global puzzles and ecstasies and agonies in terms of good things happening, bad things happening. Of course, Srila Prabhupada was equipoised throughout all that. But for the rank and file devotees, we saw the situations as agonies and ecstasies. One minute it was, wow, Hare Krishna, this is amazing. The next minute, oh my God, why did that happen? Why did he do that? Why did she do that? So it was, it was amazing. The ups and downs. It was a roller coaster ride. Sometimes the roller coaster would go way up to the top, and then sometimes, but the roller coaster kept going. It didn't go out of business. So I don't think that many of you these days understand what it was like. It was exhilarating. Never a dull moment. You could never know what was happening next. Hmm. Amidst all that, Srila Prabhupada is translating Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita in 18 months just by doing a few hours every day. So please first recognize that this is the first achintya happening, the first inconceivable happening. What you should have in your home is a full set of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. And when you look at it, you should know that you're looking at a miracle, and the miracle begins with Srila Prabhupada's completion of it in 18 months. Then, as we described in the beginning, he presented that completion to ISKCON as a problem for the whole society. Where are the books? He started speaking about this sometime end of 1974, beginning of 75. It really started to pick up. His displeasure started to become more obvious in the early part of 1975. I don't know if this is something any of you have experienced, the dissatisfaction of your spiritual master with the way things are going. Srila Prabhupada was starting to let devotees know. You have a problem here. I'm not happy with it. He started talking about it when there was just the fourth canto, volume 1 published, although he had long finished the fourth canto and fifth canto. And Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, there was just fourth canto, volume 1 out. At that time, the books were published in smaller volumes than what you see today. There was also the fifth canto and the whole of Chaitanya Charitamrita. The devotees felt that by moving the BBT press, the publishing facility, the book production facility from New York to Los Angeles, things would be better. When you hear from Rameshwar Prabhu, you'll hear in detail about that. An extraordinary, what devotees thought was an extraordinary plan, developed to counteract Srila Prabhupada's displeasure. Because the word was out. Prabhupada's not happy. Prabhupada's dissatisfied. What are we going to do about it? If you were a leader then, and especially if you had any connection to book production, book distribution, you felt the heat. Everything came to a head when Srila Prabhupada in 1975 visited Los Angeles right after the BBT moved from New York to Los Angeles. And he very clearly expressed his displeasure on morning walks. The devotees listened. They rallied their intelligence, focused all their managemental abilities on solving the crisis. You would consider that that is sufficient, yes? And they came up with a wonderful solution. I want to emphasize to you, the solution they came up with, in anyone's estimation, was superlative, A+. They presented to Srila Prabhupada that we have met, we have considered, we have fried our brains, and we have a plan we're going to put into action. Srila Prabhupada, instead of getting one book every 4 months, you will get a newly published book every month. Haribol! Fantastic, yes? You all these days talk about doubling it. Here we have a plan to quadruple it. So far, so good, right? Well, what was Srila Prabhupada's response? No. One book a month means it'll take a year for you to catch up. I want all the books in 2 months. Devotees, at first they thought something's wrong with our hearing, or it just what when someone says something and it just goes, you didn't really say that, did you? The brain just says, I didn't hear that. Maybe those of you who are householders know when one spouse says something and you just, I didn't hear that. So these devotees, their brains just, no. Their brains just couldn't process the sound vibration. So then again, they brought up to Prabhupada, The plan, you see, 1 book every month, quadruple. No, all 17 books in 2 months. I often, and maybe some of you have heard me explain the situation in this way. But I've spoken about it on other talks. This demand by Srila Prabhupada made no material sense at all to any ordinary earthling, any ordinary human being. It made no sense. What could you do though? You couldn't run away. What would you all have done these days when your spiritual master tells you something that it doesn't compute at all? You know it's impossible. Managementally, this doesn't work. Logistically, it doesn't work. What would you all do? What could we say to Prabhupada? No one could say, oh, we think we're going to find a Siksha guru. You couldn't say that back then because Prabhupada was the only one. You could play that game these days. As I often explain it, it's like your spiritual master pointing to dry land and saying, it's an ocean, swim. Or pointing to an ocean and saying, it's dry land, walk. And while he's giving this impossible order to the devotees responsible for book production and saying this has to be done, and you know the famous rebuttal he gave, impossible is a word in the Fool's Dictionary. The assembled devotees who were witnessing the whole exchange were, oh, you guys are in Maya. You guys are doubting and yeah, we were all young devotees back then. So the fact is, it was materially speaking, the situation was impossible. You just had to take it from Prabhupada. Okay, it is possible. It's possible. So finally, when the devotees in charge got over their shock, and it was a massive shock, they gathered their intelligence and started thinking how to get this inconceivable mission accomplished. They and once they started thinking how to do it, a transcendental energy descended. In other words, it's not just the isolated individual endeavor of a few devotees. No, Prabhupada was tying us all to the Achintya Shakti. And he was going to give a lesson in the inconceivable nature of devotional service to accomplish miracles. People talk about walking on water, turning things into fish and loaves or something like that. But this Chaitanya Charitamrita Marathon was a miracle. Literally, it made no sense. So once devotees put their minds to it, it's not just, my point is, it's not just their mind. They were connected. Prabhupada connected them through this challenge. He connected them to the internal potency. And so they reported back to Prabhupada that yes, it's possible, but that conclusion was only reached after they passed through this wall. They walked through a wall. And then Buddhi, Dadami Buddhi Yogam Tam, Krishna says, I give the intelligence. They had to surrender. And then they were hooked up. They were linked with that transcendental Shakti coming from Lord Krishna. So again, I emphasize to you for the third time, it wasn't like, wow, okay, Prabhupada prodded us and we figured it all out. No, Prabhupada connected the devotees through this challenge to Lord Chaitanya's inconceivable potencies. And so it's a team effort with the most inconceivable team members, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Sri Nityananda Prabhu, Srila Prabhupada. And those divine team members brought on the team, brought on board us tiny devotees and gave us a chance to experience what it was like when Lord Chaitanya was personally present, traveling through South India. Whoever would cross his path would be filled with ecstatic love, and then that person would go away and contact others and fill them with ecstatic love. And this was such a special opportunity. So yes, we all set to work at the BBT. Prabhupada toured the new BBT facility at the start of this marathon. I remember him coming into my office. It's the first and only time I encountered him personally. I had sat up close to him when he was giving class, but here's Srila Prabhupada walking into my office to hear what my service was. I explained to him how I'm going over all the productions of his books to make sure that nothing is left out and there are no mistakes. You might say I was what you call these days the copy editor, the final. I remember him. My office was a kitchen before, converted into an office. And he was looking, oh, this used to be a kitchen. And then he looked at me, and I just kept looking at his feet because I had read in second canto that the way you encounter the deities and a saintly person is first by looking at the feet. So I was just looking at the feet, thinking, Srila Prabhupada, please deliver me from material existence. So while looking at his feet, I could detect he was looking me up and down. He's looking me over, as we'd say in casual English language. You might say, checking me out. So he gave me the look over and then just gave me the only sound that I ever heard personally directed to me from Srila Prabhupada during his manifest stay with us. He just looked and said, hmm. That was it. Now, what would you do these days if that's the only personal sound you ever heard from your spiritual master. What is this? I'm giving my life. I'm sacrificing so much. And this is all I get? What would you do? I'm dropping my beads. I'm out of here. Mm. So many, in fact, most of Prabhupada's disciples learned how to associate with him through the Vani, through his instructions, and built our relationship in that way. So I got that sound, the mantra. And then he walked out of my office to the office of Jayadvaita, then Das. Now, of course, he's His Holiness Jayadvaita Swami. But at that time, he was brahmachari. I was a brahmachari. So that office was right across the hallway from mine. So he walked into that office. And of course, Jayadvaita Das was a senior devotee from the Second Avenue days. And so he knew just what to do. He had very little possessions, no furniture in his office, just a table that he sat on the floor at. But he had a chutter, and he spread the chutter on the floor for Srila Prabhupada to sit on, which Srila Prabhupada did. And Srila Prabhupada pronounced clearly, Jayadvaita means parampara. What many of you don't understand about Prabhupada's book production is that it was based on personalism, personal trust. He took a personal interest, more than a personal interest. He was into it in terms of who's who and who's not up to par, who's not up to the standard. Who some persons, in other words, he was personally invested in the whole book production process. So always remember that. He was indicating, and I've seen it repeated also, that he trusted this particular devotee with with the editing work he was doing. As some of you have read in Responsible Publishing, that brochure put out by the BBT, there's one telling incident, striking incident, which I can testify to because I was the one involved. The BBT, by that time I was acting as a production manager, sent Prabhupada a huge stack of corrections that Jayadvaita Das had made for the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. We all expected Srila Prabhupada would go through all the corrections, improving some, approving some, and altering others. Instead, one day on my desk arrived this big stack of papers from Srila Prabhupada with a note saying simply, whatever Jayadvaita has done is fine with me. So that's the way the inner dynamics of the BBT worked. Some may not like that, but that's the way it was. All right, so the marathon is underway. I remember as copy editor, my job, my service, you may say, what? You were so fortunate. My service was to read Chaitanya Charitamrita 12 hours a day. But hey, I was not reading in kind of the enjoying mood, although there's nothing wrong with enjoying Chaitanya Charitamrita. I had to make sure there were no words left out, no spelling mistakes, no punctuation mistakes. Do that 12 hours a day, 7 days a week for 2 months straight. The only example I can compare it to is it's like you're taking a university final exam in mathematics or physics every day of the week for 2 months straight. You couldn't fall asleep. And there couldn't be mistakes. Many of you know about the artists because Prabhupada always wanted artwork in his books. You know, if you're an artist, you know how attached artists are to their productions, to their creations. If there are any artists in the audience, you know. And if you have any friends or family members that are artists, you also know. They're attached. But the way the marathon worked was that the artist would be working late into the night, finishing the masterpiece, and then doze off. And when the artist woke up, someone else had, he realized, she realized someone else had finished the painting. Which for an artist is intolerable. But for the sake of Srila Prabhupada's book distribution, book production, we all did these things that normally we wouldn't do. After 2 months, the miracle was accomplished. And I always remember, and perhaps some of you remember my explaining it before. The books were printed in the USA. And by that time, for his 80th Vyasa Puja, Prabhupada was in Vrindavan at the Krishna Balaram Mandir. And so the devotee bringing the books from the advanced copies for Srila Prabhupada's personal pleasure. He flew from the USA to India, to Delhi, took a taxi from Delhi to Vrindavan, and walked into the Krishna Balaram Mandir just as Prabhupada was getting off the Vyasa-san because the Vyasa Puja ceremony had ended. And Prabhupada was walking back to his room behind the temple area, as many of you know from your visits to Vrindavan. And so the devotee happily followed behind Prabhupada, carrying the final volumes of the Inconceivable Marathon, the advanced copies. And so Prabhupada entered his room and sat down. The devotee came in, paid his dandavats, offered Prabhupada the book triumphantly. You can just imagine what the devotee is thinking. We did it, we did it, we did it, the inconceivable, we've done it. Prabhupada just nonchalantly, very calmly took the book and said, "Oh, you have promised before the ceremony, and now it is after. What would you have done if What would you do if that was the response you get from your spiritual master after an effort that defies all calculation and you just exhausted your all in all? And then inconceivably you achieve the goal and that's the response you get? Oh, you have promised before. Now it is after. Again, probably most of you would have said, that's it, we're out of here. But later that night, Srila Prabhupada dictated his famous letter to the BBT staff that by this effort, you will all go back to Godhead. So that is the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita marathon in a nutshell. You may question, why is it that Srila Prabhupada was so desirous that we have these books, these volumes of Chaitanya Charitamrita? I bring that point up because I've talked this over with godbrothers like Vaisheshika Prabhu, there seems to be a neglect of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. We know ISKCON is not the ashram days anymore. Most devotees are living in a congregational status, householders, jobs, children, the works. And the reading time can be very scarce. And when there is reading, it's okay. We hope Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam. But I've noticed in my travels all over the world that most devotees don't read Chaitanya Charitamrita for some reason. I'd like to know why, but so let's go over some points about how you cannot resist Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. As Srila Prabhupada says himself in one of his introductions to the book, it is the most advanced text. All the Vaishnava texts, Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, are equal on the absolute level. Still, there's something uniquely special about Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. It's the hidden treasure of ISKCON. So you should be thinking, why did Srila Prabhupada do his personal marathon of finishing it in 18 months? And why did he then insist that the BBT publishes it all in 2 months? There is nothing like Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur is said by very reliable authorities to have issued this pronouncement. If during the cosmic annihilation, when the universe is filling up with water, if you're around then, and you have to swim for it, you have to swim to save your life in the waters of annihilation. Why? Before you start swimming, take with you, as you're entering the water, take with you 3 books: Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, and Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. And then you can swim for it, holding on to these 3 books. But if you're having difficulty while you're swimming, you can't carry all those books and swim at the same time. Okay, let go of Bhagavad Gita. Keep swimming. Oh, you're still struggling? Believe it or not, let go of Srimad Bhagavatam. But, he said, do not let go of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. Think about that. Actually, Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita is Srimad Bhagavatam because there are so many Bhagavatam verses in it. And then again, it's different because in Srimad Bhagavatam, you are introduced in a very discreet and careful way to the existence of Srimati Radharani, whose name, as you know, is mentioned in the 10th canto by Shukadeva Goswami in a very discreet way. But in Chaitanya Charitamrita, the full-blown Radha Tattva, the full exposition is there. And many of you know the chant, Shri Krishna Chaitanya, Radha Krishna Nahayanya. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Radha Krishna combined. So that's all explained in Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. So again, Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita is the hidden treasure of ISKCON. If you haven't read it, what do you know? What can you say you know? It is very difficult to understand Krishna in this age of Kali without going through Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Sometimes devotees ask, why is it that in India there's so much misunderstanding about Krishna? He's the Hindu forest love god. He cheated on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. He danced with others' wives. So much misunderstanding. Why is that? Because they're not approaching Krishna through Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Krishna is difficult to understand. Krishna Tattva is not easy. But when you take both together, as Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita presents, Krishna Lila, Gaur Lila, together, then you can clearly see what's going on. Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami explains that Krishna Lila is like the nectar, and Gaur Lila is like the camphor. Mix them together, and such a delight you have, such a treat. So there's a distinctive flavor in Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. That distinctive flavor is all about Radha and Krishna combined as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. We felt the potency of the parampara through the Chaitanya Charitamrita publishing marathon. And you can also tap into that by properly reading and relishing Chaitanya Charitamrita, not just leaving it on your bookshelf. What to speak of, just leaving it in the BBT warehouse. One item you can remember is that before the volumes of Chaitanya Charitamrita were published, first Prabhupada had printed as a separate paperback booklet was Adi Lila Chapter 7. Now you might say, well, why was that? What's so special about Adi Lila Chapter 7? Is there some confidential nectarian Leela? Leelas? Something about Gopi Baba, Radha Tattva? Why Adi Lila Chapter 7? Why did he consider that as especially immediately necessary? He said it's because Adi Lila Chapter 7 destroys the Mayavadis. Dismantles their arguments completely through Shastra. Anyone who's affected or infected by Mayavad philosophy, and read Adi Lila chapter 7 and be purified, rectified. So that's an interesting point for you to think about. After all, Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashtacha Desha Tarine. The world is overrun with impersonalism and voidism. Not as in a form not as sophisticated these days as what you find among Prakashananda Saraswati and his followers. Not as sophisticated as, certainly not even as shastric as the Mayavad misinterpretations present themselves. Still, you can see in the classic misunderstandings and misinterpretations by Prakashananda Saraswati, you can see how they form the foundation for the kind of pop Mayavad that goes around these days, the new age pop Mayavad. So bear in mind that Adi Lila chapter 7, I know some of you might think it's tough reading, but if you actually read it, you'll see freedom from the impersonal concoctions. And you'll be able to more easily understand and accept that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, because it's impersonalism that's infecting us. In our delusion, we think, oh, beyond Krishna, there must be something. Whatever it is, beyond Krishna. Some other points to understand are that, as Srila Prabhupada tells us, Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita was his spiritual master, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur's favorite book. And that in Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur's leisure time, he would read Chaitanya Charitamrita. That teaches you something. Leisure time, relaxation time. What do? Facebook? Movies? Netflix? Football game? No, leisure time is for relishing Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. What do you think? I know some of you are thinking, how can anyone unwind in that way? But try it. And you'll also see in Chaitanya Charitamrita, in Srila Prabhupada's commentary, how he expresses his personal desires. He said, I wish that devotees of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu globally would enjoy Chaitanya Charitamrita. So there you have the blessings of the founder Acharya. Enjoy this. And the example of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Relax with this. Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami compares Chaitanya Charitamrita to be a lake that the swan of your mind can play in. Visualize that. The swan of your mind delighting in this Italian lake. So these are some thoughts that I wanted to share with you. Please do something about Chaitanya Charitamrita being the hidden treasure of ISKCON. The treasure should be plundered and everyone should share in the riches, because you'll more easily understand Krishna in this way. Chaitanya Charitamrita deals with Krishna Tattva, Bhakti Tattva, Rasa Tattva, Bhava Tattva, Leela Tattva. It's all there. Krishna, as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is demonstrating how to be the best lover of Krishna. All right, any questions?
Thank you so much, Maharaj, for a wonderful, wonderful class that you have given. And it's really inspiring to know the details that you shared. And if devotees, if you like to ask question for Maharaj, please post it on the chat, and then we can read them out. Maharaj, while the questions are rolling in, I have one question for you, Maharaj. Maharaj, you said that when Srila Prabhupada expresses dissatisfaction, you all felt that heat. So today we are fortunate that we have all these books available, Chaitanya Charitamrita, easily to order from BBT. How can we feel that heat to distribute them and share with everybody in the world, Maharaj? Thank you.
As I explained, we have a crisis situation. Chaitanya Charitamrita sits in the warehouse. Devotees are not reading it. I know, because before COVID, I would travel on every continent in the world. I know what's going on. Some householders don't even have the full set in their home. Many do have this full set, but the set is a decoration on their bookshelf. So we need to reignite fascination with the treasure of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. I remember in the early 70s when the first few volumes came out. Oh, all the devotees were so fascinated seeing the correlation between Gaura Leela and Krishna Leela and the plundering of the storehouse of love of Krishna. The more the Panchatattva danced, the more they made it easier to love Krishna. The more they tasted love of Krishna, the more the supply increased. We were like, wow, what is this? And then reading about the desire tree, the kalpataru, and the branches on the tree, and all the different devotees of Mahaprabhu, of Nityananda Prabhu. And then as we became older devotees, Madhya Lila and then Ansha Lila started becoming so crucial for our spiritual development. Because whether you understand it or not, our sampradaya is about love of Krishna and separation, Vripalamba Seva. And as you become advanced in bhakti, that reality becomes more and more crucial for you. And it's all there in especially Ansha Lila.
Thank you. Thank you, Maharaj. We have some questions that came in, Maharaj. One question is from Ananta Gauranga Prabhu. He mentioned that, Hare Krishna Maharaj, what was the daily schedule during the 2 months?
Forget about eating, forget about sleeping. There were others than the editors who worked more than 12 hours a day. But you see, for doing editing work, 12 hours a day is about your limit. Otherwise, you will make mistakes. But we started 8 in the morning and went till 8 at night. We did go to the full morning program, but there were some who if they were doing kind of production work, dealing with the technology, and they didn't have to be so mentally alert as an editor would have to be, they would work much longer hours. What you are asking about is a mass act of surrender. And when there's this mass act of surrender, amazing things happen. And somehow or other, I wish every devotee would have an opportunity to taste a situation like that, where you see something beyond your capacity descends and empowers you. You'll never forget that experience. When you truly understand that Krishna is a dokshaja, beyond material perception, and bhakti is a phenomenon only of the spiritual world, it's not of the material world. You'll never forget that.
Thank you, Maharaj. There are a couple of questions, Maharaj, coming in. They all are similar. It is said that many senior devotees think that they are not even qualified to start reading Chaitanya Charitamrita. And some of them say that, do we have to first finish reading Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, and then go to Chaitanya Charitamrita? Or can we read Chaitanya Charitamrita alongside, even if we don't complete the other books? Thank you.
Hurry up and finish Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. You should be eager. First, relish those treasures. I would say if you want to jump ahead, read Adilila chapter 7 to make sure you're deprogrammed from any Mayavad tendencies. Otherwise, by all means, make haste in a careful way to read Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam. So much work to be done. So much research work about Krishna and Lord Chaitanya to be done by reading those books so you can understand the science of Krishna, the science of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and how they are interrelated. Don't wait. In terms of procrastination, becoming busy, doing so many unnecessary things, you should feel the pressure on you. And that's a good thing. Transcendental pressure. I've got to make the most of this human form of life. And that means I've got to get to the point where I can read Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita.
Thank you, Maharaj. There is another question. A devotee is asking, how do we get a taste to reading Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita? What services should be rendered to get that taste to read?
You're asking about everything in our bhakti program. Everything. Mamana bhava mad bhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru. You become Krishna conscious and then distribute it to others. Throughout Chaitanya Charitamrita, Srila Prabhupada's appealing. He said, the Indians and to the whole world, join in this great effort to distribute Krishna consciousness. Free the whole world from the illusory energy. So while we're hearing about the intricacies, the delights of Krishna Lila in very advanced ways, there's also constant exhortation, constant urging, distribute, preach, spread the flood of love of Krishna everywhere. It's all going on at once. Krishna Lila and Gaur Lila are interrelated. So similarly, hearing about Krishna and distributing Krishna are all interrelated. So it's the whole bhakti program. that is necessary for us. And the whole Bhakti program includes make your life perfect and help others to do the same. Be a gardener. That's the name of your campaign, right? Mahaprabhu is saying, I can't do this alone. Of course, he can do anything, but he's asking for you to join in so that you get some credit.
Thank you, Maharaj. There is one question by Sayak Basu Prabhu. He's saying that, can we give a Chaitanya Charitamrita set to someone who is fairly new devotee in Bhakti, but wants to read Chaitanya Charitamrita?
You can give Chaitanya Charitamrita to anyone and everyone. Hopefully, you'll interact with that person so that you cultivate the person, and that way they can, while having the set in their home, they realize I need to read Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. But I know, truth be told, during the huge book distribution marathons in the USA in the 70s, during Prabhupada's presence amongst us, devotees asked him, well, because, the BBT is printing like 20,000 Anjalila Volume 1s, Anjalila Volume 2s, and like, what's the ordinary person going to think about it? Of course, what's an ordinary person going to think about anything? Srimad Bhagavatam. But it's true that Chaitanya Charitamrita is the most advanced text. So Prabhupada replied, just wherever they open the book, it's sweet. Still, we shouldn't let the situation just be like that. Yes, they're opening the book wherever they open. It's sweet, but we should take it upon ourselves to increase our service by properly cultivating them and bringing them along. So we should see the situation as an opportunity to do more service. Oh, you have Chaitanya Charitamrita, you don't have a clue what it's about, you haven't read Bhagavad Gita, you haven't read Srimad Bhagavatam. Let me help you progress to the point where you can realize the treasure you have. In other words, we shouldn't be lazy. Oh, anywhere they open is sweet, so I can just sleep. No need for me to try to help anyone. It's all nectar. No, we should see the opportunity for doing more service by helping them.
Thank you, Maharaj. Maharaj, there's another question. It says, Maharaj, how did you not feel discouraged and push on with the enthusiasm when you had given the whole life to Srila Prabhupada and his mission, and all he gave you was a sound, not even a single sentence?
The Vani is more intense than the Vapu. Please understand that. The association through the instruction is more intense than the physical association. I also remember something Srila Prabhupada wrote, because while working at the BBT, I also had the wonderful service of filing all his correspondence. I was entrusted with the whole collection of Prabhupada's letters, not simply the letters he wrote, but the letters to him. I got to see it all. I often tell the story of how the BBT trustee at the time, Rameshwar Prabhu, came one day, showed up at my office with this huge cardboard box. And he told me, Devamrita, these are all Prabhupada's correspondence, letters to him and from him. Keep these in your office but don't read them. As soon as, I have to confess, as soon as he walked out the door, immediately Jayadvaita Das, who's across the hall from me, comes running into my office. Okay, let's get into it. So I saw one letter where I got lost in the ecstasy of that situation. What was this question again? What was the question again? I was just
It was
lost in
like,
visualizing that scene.
yeah, that in spite of Prabhupada giving you only a sigh, how
Oh, okay. He wrote, because back then we all thought that whoever is physically closest to Prabhupada is the most advanced devotee. That's, that's the way we judge things. We didn't understand how Prabhupada was engaging persons in service according to the situation, according to the person. Sometimes those who were physically close to him fell away, sometimes not. So he wrote that if you judge who is the most advanced devotee by who is physically most close to me, then I say the mosquito is the most advanced devotee. But what is the purpose of the mosquito? It's to bite me. I remember seeing that. That shifted my whole vision, because my whole modus operandi, my whole goal at the BBT was to get Prabhupada's association. I was really intensely desiring that. So as far as hearing just one sound, yes, but then again, the association to the Vani is even more intense. Bhakti is mystical. And this is something every disciple will have to understand, because physical presence is not eternal. Association through the instruction is eternal. And we're not just saying that. It's not just some kind of pacifying talk. It's a scientific reality. Along with the super soul in the heart are the devotees and the associates of the super soul. Prabhupada writes that at the end of Chaitanya Charitamrita. I'm doing all this, he says. I've written this book on the inspiration of the association from my spiritual master, who's always present with me. And then he says, Tene Brahma Hridaya. Lord Brahma was enlightened through the heart. Similarly, the super soul is there. That means my spiritual master is there, because the super soul is never alone. He's there with his devotees, his associates. He gives you a loud hint of some transcendental mysteries. Next question.
Thank you, Maharaj. A question from Anukula Seva Prabhu. He asks, how can we pass through and break the walls we have created in our service?
Break what?
Break the walls. We have the walls that we created in our service.
I don't understand what is meant by walls in our service. Limitations?
Yes, Maharaj, like just self-imposed limitations that we might have.
Sign up for some kind of marathon or some campaign in bhakti that takes you beyond the capacity you thought you have. And you'll see.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Maharaj, there's a question from Japan. They're asking, can you please explain again what Srila Prabhupada showed us by giving this service of publishing in 2 months? And she's also asking, like, when we try to sell these books to who doesn't know anything about Krishna at all, especially in Japan, can we separately sell the Adi Lila Volume 7?
It's wonderful that Chaitanya Charitamrita is printed in all languages. And that means if you're printing, you have to distribute. So we did this during Prabhupada's presence amongst us. We were distributing at the airports. Anchalila Volume 1 or 2. What we should do simultaneously is have cultivation programs available so that you can bring people along in their entry into Prabhupada's books. In other words, what you're talking about is an opportunity for more service. Prabhupada wanted the books printed in all languages. He wanted all his books. That means if you're printing, you have these copies, someone has to buy them. So take it as a impetus to have the proper outreach and cultivation programs so that you can help people become qualified for Chaitanya Charitamrita step by step. Meanwhile, the book distribution must go on. The Brihad Mridanga must beat. But we should take it as an opportunity for us to do more service. How can we provide places, centers where people can come and feel nourished, nurtured, cultivated, rather than just the books are out there, now I can sleep. Of course, it's wonderful that the books are out there. Don't get me wrong, but having the books distributed leads to more service, not less. Anything else?
Maharaj, one last question, Maharaj. Devotee is asking that can we also consider Chaitanya Charitamrita as Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya, meaning reading daily? And
yes, it is Bhagavatam. As I said, it's got so many Bhagavatam verses in it. And Lord Chaitanya is demonstrating Srimad Bhagavatam in action, how to love Krishna in pure devotion. So yes, you can certainly consider that when you're reading Chaitanya Charitamrita, you're reading Bhagavatam. Kaviraj Goswami mentions that. Somebody might say, oh, there's so many Sanskrit verses in this book. But he says, I've given explanations of those verses in the Bengali language. And that language is the language in Chaitanya Charitamrita is so exquisite. Those of you from Bengal know better, but I've been told by devotees in Bengal that even to this day, Chaitanya Charitamrita is taught as an example of the most sublime Bengali literature. Not its spiritual value, but just the poetry, I see Tolodot Prandas nodding his head. I knew he would do that. It's just so exquisite. I wanted to learn Bengali just so I could read Chaitanya Charitamrita in Bengali, but His Holiness Bhakti Trumar said, no, it's not necessary. Just read English and preach. But Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur predicted the time will come when people will learn Bengali just so they can read Chaitanya Charitamrita and capture the full poetry, literary ornamentation. But nevertheless, just reading Prabhupada's translations satisfy the soul completely. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Maharaj, that you've given us so much of your time to enlighten us. Definitely, this inspired everybody, especially me. I'm very grateful that you came, Maharaj. Thank you so much. Um,
All right. I'll leave you to make some announcements, right?
yes, Maharaj. Thank you so much. I just wanted to let everybody know that our Be a Gardener campaign has another session this Sunday. And we will have His Grace Rameshwar Prabhu and Her Grace Dhriti Mataji explain their perspective about publishing and then art and painting. Dhriti Mataji will explain that. And we also wanted to let you know that our goals for Be a Gardener are our campaign goals are that we wanted to read and share at least one verse from Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, listen to at least one Srila Prabhupada's lecture on Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, and the suggested reading is Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi Leela 1.4 from 1975 in Mayapur. And we want to take an inventory of your Chaitanya Charitamrita sets at the temple. The more you show, the more you sell. And to make at least one set of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita visible. And to inaugurate at least 10 additional monthly Sankirtan festivals globally. And I just want to share one thing, that when we made these goals visible to everybody at ISV, there is a girl, her name is Ananya. She's 10 years old. And we just asked them, anybody would like to take a goal to distribute Chaitanya Charitamritas? And she spontaneously picked it up. And she calls all her mom's friends and everybody, and she distributed 11 CC sets so far. She's just 10 years old. So this is really inspiring to hear from so many Maharajs like this, to get inspiration so we can read ourselves and share with others. Thank you, everybody, for attending this session. And we hope to see you soon this Sunday. Hare Krishna.